The chapel grew eerily quiet as tears traced down Harper's cheeks. Her ivory dress draped around her wheelchair like a shattered illusion. The man who had sworn to love her eternally now loomed above, his expression twisted with cold finality. "I can't do this," he declared to the stunned congregation. "I can't marry someone like her." The words hung like venom in the air as Harper's world collapsed at the altar. She had always known life to be cruel. Orphaned young and paralyzed since infancy, Harper had battled for every shred of happiness in her 27 years. Love had felt like a miracle, the family she never thought she'd find. But now, on what should have been the pinnacle of her joy, her dream unraveled before her. The guests shifted in their seats, hushed murmurs filling the air. Some faces revealed pity, others a morbid curiosity at her public disgrace. Her fiancé, Tyler, recoiled from her wheelchair like her condition might infect him. The engagement ring he had slipped on her finger 6 months prior now felt like a cuff, locking her into this moment of crushing betrayal. "You knew what this meant," Harper whispered, voice cracking. "You said it didn't matter." "I was wrong," Tyler said coolly. "I thought I could manage, but I can't spend my life with someone who needs that much." The chapel doors slammed open. A collective gasp echoed as heavy footsteps rang down the aisle. All eyes turned to the entryway, where a towering figure stood against the flood of sunlight. Though his face remained shadowed, the danger in his presence was unmistakable. As he stepped into the dim interior, recognition dawned across several faces. Then fear. Dante Moretti. The mere name made people cross streets at noon. His name wasn't whispered in legend. It was carved into the city's underworld in blood. What business could such a man have at a wedding? Dante stalked down the aisle with silent menace. His tailored black suit was flawless, his face unreadable. 2 men trailed behind, one older with a weathered face, the other younger with eyes like steel, both obviously armed under their coats. Guests shrank back. Parents drew children near. Men instinctively shielded their wives. Tyler turned ashen. "Mr. Moretti," he stuttered. "I don't understand." Dante offered no reply. His gaze never wavered from Harper, whose tears froze in stunned disbelief. His stare carried something unrateable, more intense than the ruthlessness expected of him. Without a word, he advanced toward the altar. Standing over Harper, his broad form cast a shadow over the stained glass glow. For one chilling second, she feared he meant her harm. Maybe she owed a debt, or someone in her life had wronged him. But Dante knelt to her level. Up close, she saw the edge in his face, the fine scar along his jaw, the eyes of a man who had seen and dealt violence. Yet there was something else, something she couldn't quite name. "Harper," he said, his voice rough, like her name didn't belong in his mouth. It was the first word he'd spoken. She stared back, a tremor in her limbs. "Do I know you?" Her lips didn't move, but the question was loud in her stare, a flick of his jaw muscle. "No," he said simply. Then, to the crowd's astonishment, Dante scooped her into his arms, one beneath her knees, the other behind her back, as though she were weightless. "What are you doing?" Harper gasped, her hands clinging to his shoulders instinctively. "Put me down." Dante turned. Harper held tight to his neck as he strode back down the aisle. The room was silent. Not even Tyler found the courage to speak as the feared criminal walked away with the forsaken bride. "My wheelchair," Harper pleaded, glancing over his shoulder. "I need my—" "Luca," Dante called. The older of the 2 men stepped forward, folding the wheelchair and following. Outside, a sleek black limo with tinted windows idled at the curb, a driver poised beside it. The sun hit Harper's face as she emerged, forcing her eyes shut. Everything was happening too fast to understand. The rejection, the humiliation, and now this strange abduction by a man whose name struck fear across the entire city. "Please," she said again as Dante neared the vehicle. "There's been a mistake. I don't know you. I don't owe you anything." Dante finally looked down at her, his face unreadable. "No mistakes," he said simply. The younger man stepped forward quickly and opened the car door, and Dante slid inside, still carrying Harper against his chest. The interior of the limousine was cool and dim. The leather seats were soft beneath her as Dante finally placed her down. Her wedding dress bunched around her, the luxurious material now wrinkled and ruined. The 2 men entered after, folding her wheelchair and stashing it in the trunk before sitting across from them. The doors shut with a quiet, luxurious thud, locking her in with these men whose presence reeked of danger. "You can't just take me," Harper said. Her voice grew firmer as shock gave way to fury. "This is kidnapping. People saw. The whole chapel saw you." Dante sat beside her, leaving a careful gap between them. "And what did they do?" he asked calmly. The question silenced her. She remembered the faces, friends, family, acquaintances. Not one of them had intervened. Not one had spoken out. They had watched her public disgrace and abduction with the same blank detachment. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, gripping the folds of her dress. "Home," Dante replied. The limo pulled away from the curb, leaving the chapel, and everything Harper had once hoped for, behind. She looked out the window, watching the streets pass. She should have been screaming, struggling, calling for help. Instead, a numbing stillness settled over her. Maybe it was shock. Or maybe, somehow, anything felt better than returning to the empty apartment she'd once shared with Tyler, filled with unopened gifts and a future now turned to dust. As the limousine wound through the city, silence filled the space. The older man, Luca, regarded her with calm disinterest. The younger one stared out the window, one hand close to the shape beneath his jacket that could only be a gun. Dante said nothing, his large hands resting on his knees, his face unreadable against the changing backdrop outside. "You called me by name," Harper said finally. "How do you know who I am?" Dante turned toward her, eyes dark and hard to read. "I make it my business to know many things." "That's not an answer." His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something close, something that softened his cold exterior for a fleeting second. "You're brave." "Good. You'll need that." A chill ran through Harper. "Needed for what? What do you want from me?" Dante didn't reply. Instead, he reached into his jacket, and Harper instinctively flinched, only for him to pull out a handkerchief and silently offer it to her. That was when she realized. Tears were still rolling down her cheeks. Her makeup was likely ruined, her hair loosening from its carefully arranged pins. She accepted the handkerchief hesitantly. "Thank you," she murmured, the words automatic, drilled into her by years of social grace stronger than fear. The fabric was soft and high-end, with the initials DM embroidered neatly in one corner. She dabbed her face with it. The absurdity of caring about her looks in this moment didn't escape her. The city skyline slowly gave way to outlying neighborhoods, then to stretches of open land and trees. They were leaving the city behind, climbing a winding road into the thick forested hills. With every turn, Harper's sense of dread deepened. People disappeared in these woods. Bodies had been found here. News headlines she used to read with detachment over coffee now struck a personal chord. "Please," she tried once more, her voice barely above a whisper. "My parents died when I was 3. I have no family. There's no one to pay ransom for me. I don't have money." "This isn't about money," Dante said, still watching the road. "Then, what is it about?" He turned, something shifting behind his otherwise impassive face. "Safety." Before she could press him, the limousine veered off the main road, onto a private drive flanked by a security gate and 2 armed guards who straightened as the car neared. The gate opened without needing to stop, and they continued up a long, curving drive lined with towering trees that dimmed the daylight. As the forest cleared, Harper couldn't stop the gasp that escaped her lips. Before them stood a massive mansion, something out of a film, built of stone, laced with Gothic details, and surrounded by manicured gardens. It was more than a house. It was a stronghold. Halls enclosed the grounds, and more guards moved within, weapons no longer concealed. The limo rolled to a stop in front of grand steps leading to double doors so large they dwarfed even Dante's frame. Harper's stomach dropped at the sight of those steps. After years of life in a wheelchair, it was an automatic reaction. As if reading her mind, Dante spoke quietly, "There's a step-free entrance on the side." But before she could reply, he was out of the car, then turning back to scoop her into his arms again. This time, there were no guests to watch her shame, only silent guards who looked away respectfully as their boss carried a woman in a tattered bridal gown toward the estate. The younger man accompanying them jogged ahead to open the door, and Luca followed with her wheelchair. The mansion's interior matched its commanding presence. Towering ceilings, classic architecture, and a heavy sense of restrained wealth. Dante carried her across a vast entry hall and into what looked like a sitting room, finally setting her gently onto an antique sofa. Her dress bunched awkwardly around her against the deep burgundy upholstery. "Your chair," Dante said, nodding at Luca, who quietly unfolded it and placed it near the sofa. The gesture, though simple, brought a strange comfort. At least they weren't taking away her mobility. "Mr. Moretti," a firm woman's voice called from the doorway. A woman in her 60s stood stiffly, gray hair pulled back in a tight knot, dressed in plain black, posture straight as a soldier. Her expression was cool, professional, but alert. "Sophia," Dante acknowledged her. "This is Harper. She'll be staying here. Prepare the East Wing suite." Sophia's eyes flicked over Harper, registering the gown, the smeared makeup, and the unease. For a moment, something like compassion passed through her features before she returned to a neutral tone. "Of course. And shall I bring something more suitable to wear? The lady seems unexpectedly attired." Despite it all, Harper almost laughed at the understatement. Here she was, essentially abducted in a wedding gown, and this woman was worried about appropriate clothing. "Yes," Dante said, "and food and anything else she requires." He turned to Harper. "Sophia is my housekeeper. She'll help you get settled. If you need something, ask her." "Settle in?" Harper repeated, stunned. "I'm not staying here. This is kidnapping. You can't just—" "I can," Dante cut in, his tone firm, leaving no room for argument. "You'll remain here, under my protection, until I decide it's safe for you to leave." "Protection from what?" Harper shot back. "The only threat I've seen today is you." A flicker of something, anger, maybe even pain, crossed Dante's face, but it vanished quickly. "You don't understand danger, Harper, but you'll be safe here." He turned to go, pausing in the doorway. "Sophia will show you to your room. This is your home now. Accept it." And then he was gone, leaving Harper with the stern housekeeper and the suffocating reality of what her life had just become. She couldn't stop the fresh tears that welled and fell. Sophia let out a quiet sigh, her sharp posture softening. "Come now, child," she said, her accent thickening as her tone gentled. "Let's get you out of that dress and into something more comfortable. Then, food. Things always seem clearer after food." Harper glanced at her chair, then around the foreign room. Beyond these walls was a world where she'd been left at the altar, mocked and discarded by everyone she trusted. Inside was a man known for ruthlessness and danger. Neither place felt safe. "Why am I here?" she asked Sophia softly. "What does he want with me?" The older woman's expression stayed unreadable, though something flickered in her eyes, something Harper couldn't quite name. "That's not mine to answer," she said gently. "But I can tell you this. In all my years working for Mr. Moretti, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you." "And how was that?" Harper asked bitterly. "Like he just acquired something?" Sophia shook her head slowly. "No, child. Like he'd found something precious he thought he'd lost forever." Harper's first night in Dante Moretti's mansion passed without sleep. Despite the lavish suite Sophia led her to, a room larger than the apartment she'd shared with Tyler, comfort was nowhere to be found. The bed was soft, the sheets fine silk, but every creak, every distant sound startled her awake. Somewhere in this massive house lurked a man who had taken her from the altar, a man whose name sent fear through the streets, whose power was whispered with dread. When morning light seeped through the heavy curtains, Sophia entered with a breakfast tray. The older woman had helped Harper out of her gown the night before, dressing her in silk sleepwear that, strangely, fit perfectly. Now she carried another set of clothing along with the food. "Mr. Moretti had these delivered this morning," Sophia said, laying out an elegant but simple outfit, trousers and a blouse designed for someone in a wheelchair. "He guessed your size. If anything doesn't fit, we'll adjust it today." Harper stared at the outfit in disbelief. He picked these out?" Sophia's mouth twitched as if holding back a laugh. "Mr. Moretti doesn't shop, he makes phone calls. But yes, he arranged all this. There are more in the closet." Harper wheeled herself to the walk-in closet and froze. It was partly stocked with clothes, all in her size, all designed with accessibility in mind. Dresses that looked refined while seated, pants without bulky seams, and multiple pairs of stylish flat shoes. It was the kind of tailored functional wardrobe she had only ever dreamed of affording. "How did he know?" she whispered. Sophia, adjusting the breakfast tray on a nearby table, simply shrugged. "Mr. Moretti sees things most people overlook. Eat before it gets cold. The food was exceptional. Fresh fruit, pastries still warm, and coffee brewed just the way she liked. Despite everything, Harper realized she was starving after the emotional blow of the previous day. As she ate, she stared out the window at the sprawling estate. The mansion was even grander than it first appeared, surrounded by lush gardens that melted into thick forest. In the distance, guards moved along the property's edges. "Am I being held prisoner?" she asked, watching as Sophia straightened an already pristine corner of the room. The housekeeper paused. "The security isn't to keep you in, child. It's to keep others out." "Others? Who exactly?" Sophia's face grew guarded. "Mr. Moretti has enemies. A lot of enemies." "And why should that be my concern?" Harper asked. "Because," Sophia replied plainly, "his enemies are yours now." She walked toward the doorway. "When you're ready, I'll give you a tour. It's easier if you don't think of yourself as a prisoner." "Then what should I think of myself as?" Harper said sharply. Sophia thought a moment. "A guest, under protection." Alone again, Harper changed into the clothes Dante had provided. They fit her perfectly. She brushed her hair, washed her face, and tried to gather her rattled thoughts. She needed to stay clear-headed. Escape seemed out of reach. Even if she could somehow avoid the guards, the estate was too remote, surrounded by forest, and in a wheelchair she wouldn't make it far. A more sensible plan would be convincing Dante Moretti to let her leave. But to do that, she needed to understand why she'd been brought here to begin with. What interest could a powerful crime boss possibly have in her? Sophia returned mid-morning and took Harper on a quiet tour of the areas she'd be allowed to access. It felt like walking through a private museum, rooms full of art, priceless pieces, a library with shelves that touched the ceiling, a glass conservatory filled with rare plants. Sophia carefully pointed out which entrances had ramps, which corridors were wide enough, which spaces had been adjusted for easier mobility. Once again, Harper couldn't ignore the detail and preparation that had clearly gone into this. "How long has he been planning this?" she asked, as they stepped into a bright solarium already set for lunch. "Planning what, dear?" "Bringing me here," Harper said. "These modifications didn't happen overnight." Sophia's face gave away nothing. "Mr. Moretti has owned this estate for many years. The accommodations, as you call them, have always been in place." Before Harper could say more, the solarium doors opened and Dante stepped in. In the daylight, he looked different, still intimidating, but strangely more human. He wore a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled, exposing muscular forearms with small faded scars. His dark hair was damp, as if he'd just showered. "You're up," he said, his voice deep and steady. "Good. I hope you slept well." The absurd politeness of the question shattered something in Harper. "Slept well?" she echoed, almost laughing. "You dragged me from my own wedding." "A wedding that was already finished," Dante interrupted coolly. "Or did you want to stay there and be humiliated longer?" The words landed like a slap. Harper flinched, the sting of Tyler's betrayal still fresh, still raw. "That wasn't your choice to make," she said, her voice quieter now. "You had no right." Dante pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Sophia quietly exited, leaving them alone. "Perhaps not," he admitted, surprising Harper. "But it's done. You're here now. Safe." "Safe from what?" she demanded. "You keep saying that, but you won't explain what danger I'm supposedly in." Dante's jaw tightened. "The world is full of threats for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Harper's eyes sparked with anger. "You mean what? You think I don't know how vulnerable I am? I've lived in this body my whole life, Mr. Moretti. I don't need you to shield me from a world I already survive in, every single day." Something like respect flickered in his gaze. "I didn't mean your disability," he said, voice low. "I meant someone innocent, someone good." He turned slightly, his profile stark against the daylight spilling in. Goodness doesn't survive long in this city without protection. There was something buried in those words, experience, loss, that quieted Harper's rage for a moment. She noticed the way his eyes darkened, not with anger, but memory, a kind that aged a man behind his years. The kind that left quiet grief etched into the hard lines of his face. For a second, Harper forgot her own frustration and saw someone who had lost more than he let on. Before she could respond, Sophia returned with lunch, a light meal of soup and sandwiches that under normal circumstances would have tasted wonderful. They ate in silence, the air thick with unspoken questions. Dante occasionally glanced her way, as if confirming she was actually eating. The scene felt absurd, eating lunch across from a man known for violence, his hands wrapped delicately around a spoon. Harper watched him carefully, unable to reconcile the gentleness of the moment with the brutality his name was rumored to carry. There was something unsettling about the contrast, something disarming. It made her feel off balance, as though the man before her defied every story she'd ever heard. "The clothes fit well," he noted at last. "Do you need anything else?" Harper set her spoon down. "I need answers, real ones. No more vague lines about protection and danger." Dante studied her for a long moment, eyes impossible to read. "You're here because there's nowhere else for you to be," he said finally. "Your fiancé left you. You have no family. Your friends stood by and watched it happen. Here you have comfort, security." "Except freedom," Harper cut in. "Freedom to do what?" he asked. "Go back to that empty apartment? Listen to the gossip and pity?" He leaned forward slightly. "Stay. Give it time. When things calm down, we can talk about what comes next." It wasn't a question, and they both knew it. Dante Moretti wasn't a man used to being refused, but there was something beneath his tone, not cruelty, but something quieter, something almost like pleading. Harper's heart skipped at that tone, unexpected, raw. In his restrained voice she heard a man not trying to dominate, but trying not to lose control. It wasn't power he was holding over her, it was vulnerability he was barely willing to show. "1 week," Harper said suddenly, startling even herself. "I'll stay 1 week, no escape attempts, no police calls, but you have to be honest with me." Dante's brows lifted slightly, clearly unprepared for negotiation. After a pause, he nodded. 1 week, but there are questions I can't answer, not yet." It was a strange compromise for someone who could simply keep her here forever. Harper didn't understand his willingness to bargain, but she took the chance. "First question," she said. "How do you know me? We've never met, but you called me by name at the church." A muscle in Dante's jaw flexed. "I make it my business to know certain things about the city, about its people." "That's not an answer," Harper pressed. "Why me? I'm nobody." His expression softened, barely, but it did. "You're not nobody," he said quietly. The words struck her harder than she expected. She had spent years convincing herself she could disappear and no one would notice. And now here he was, a man with the power to erase lives, insisting she mattered. Before she could ask anything more, he stood. "I have business to attend to. Sophia will take care of anything you need. You're free to explore the house and grounds, except for the West Wing. That part is private." The stern warning about the West Wing sent a shiver down Harper's spine. "What's in the West Wing?" she asked. "My offices. Business matters." Dante's tone left no room for further questioning. "Dinner is at 7. I'd appreciate your company if you're feeling up to it." And then he was gone, leaving Harper with more questions than answers, and a growing sense that beneath Dante Moretti's cold precision was a man in quiet turmoil. The rest of the day passed slowly. Harper explored the mansion, part curiosity, part silent investigation. The estate was vast, with hallways that twisted back on themselves, and rooms whose purposes she couldn't quite guess. Despite Dante's instruction, she found herself drawn toward the restricted West Wing, rolling her wheelchair quietly down the corridor leading in that direction. She had no real plan to enter, only to see what was so secret it warranted a formal restriction. As she neared the heavy double doors, she stopped. Voices. Male, hushed but urgent. One of them was unmistakably Dante's. The other was Luca's, the older, scarred man who had been with them at the church. "You can't afford distractions right now," Luca was saying. "The De Lucas are making moves on the south side. They think you've gone soft." "Let them," Dante replied, voice like steel. "It'll make the shock sweeter when I take them down." "And the girl, what were you thinking, bringing her into the heart of this?" Luca continued. "If they find out who she is to you—" "Enough," Dante snapped. "She stays. She's safer here than anywhere else. I won't debate it." "You're risking everything," Luca said more gently this time. "At least tell her the truth." "She's not ready," Dante replied, and there was a sharp edge of pain beneath the calm. "She doesn't remember. And when she does," he hesitated, "she'll hate me for what I've become." Harper's heart thundered in her chest. She was certain they would hear it through the door. Remember? What was she supposed to remember? She'd never met Dante Moretti before yesterday. She would remember someone like him. Yet he spoke as if they shared a past, as if something important had been forgotten. The sound of approaching footsteps startled her into motion. Turning her chair as quietly as she could, she wheeled back down the hallway, rounding a corner just as the door creaked open behind her. Her thoughts spun wildly as she steered toward more familiar halls. But in her haste, she took a wrong turn and entered a part of the house Sophia hadn't shown her. This corridor was different, lined not with priceless paintings, but with simple framed photographs, personal ones. Harper rolled closer, curiosity overcoming caution. Her breath caught. In one slightly faded photo, a group of children stood stiffly in front of a cold, stone building. It took a few seconds to recognize it. St. Margaret's Orphanage, the institution where she had spent a decade after losing her parents. She knew that building intimately. The icy stone steps that required others to carry her up and down, the dorm rooms with their sterile beds, the small chapel where prayers were whispered every morning and night. With shaking hands, Harper lifted the frame from the wall, studying it more closely. The children were lined up in formation, their faces blank and solemn, like children in places like that often were. In the back row stood a thin boy, probably no older than 12, dark-haired with serious eyes, one hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a much smaller child in front of him, a little girl in a wheelchair. Harper stared at the image of her younger self, maybe 6, her hair neatly braided, her legs already showing the signs of the condition she was born with, and the boy behind her. "Dante," she whispered, stunned, recognizing what she should have seen immediately. The same intense eyes, the same strong jawline, just softer in youth, the same protective stance behind her wheelchair. It was all there. Frantically, she examined the rest of the photos on the wall. More images from the orphanage. Kids in the dining room, the courtyard, a small classroom. And always the same pattern. Young Dante near young Harper. Always within reach. Often with his hand on her shoulder or the handle of her chair. Then the pictures began pulling at deeper memories. Harper and Dante beneath a tree in the yard, him reading to her. The two of them at what must have been a holiday party, Harper smiling at a small wrapped gift in her lap. Dante pushing her wheelchair through snowy paths, both wrapped in scarves. The last photo made her freeze. Harper, maybe 10, asleep in her chair. Beside her, a teenage Dante, no longer skinny, beginning to show the build of the man he'd become, looking at her with such gentle concern that Harper's adult eyes welled with tears. How had she forgotten him? This boy, her protector, her friend, maybe her only companion in that cold institution. She dug through her memory, reaching for a voice that had once read to her at night, strong arms that had lifted her when the staff couldn't be bothered, a steady presence that kept cruel kids at bay. But the face, his face remained cloudy in her mind, as if obscured by fog. "You weren't supposed to find those," came Dante's voice behind her, and she nearly dropped the frame in her hands. She turned her wheelchair to face him, photo still clutched tightly. "Why didn't you tell me? We knew each other at St. Margaret's. You wursed. You looked out for me." Dante's expression was strangely open as he looked at the photo. "Yes," he said softly, "but I don't remember you. Not clearly." "How's that possible?" she asked. "All these pictures, we were close." He stepped closer and gently took the frame from her, returning it to its place on the wall. "They gave you medicine at the orphanage, said it was for pain, but it blurred things, blurred memories. And later," he paused, "it was better that you forgot me." "Better?" Harper's voice rose with confusion. "How is it better to forget someone who cared about me?" "You were happy," he said, his tone now harder. "There was no reason to remind you of something that would only bring pain." "Then why didn't you tell me at the church? Why pretend we didn't know each other?" Dante's eyes turned cold, his mask slipping back into place. "Because we don't know each other. Not anymore. That boy doesn't exist, and what's left isn't someone you should remember fondly." "That's not your choice," Harper said firmly. "I deserve the truth. All of it." For a moment, she thought he'd deny her. But then he sighed, deeply, and something about him looked tired. "Come," he said. "If you want the truth, I'll show you where it began." Dante led her through the halls to a room she hadn't seen before. A small, quiet study lined with books and centered around a dark wooden desk. Unlike the grand library, this space felt lived in, personal. He gestured for her to enter, then shut the door behind them. From one of the drawers, he pulled out a worn leather box. His hands capable of commanding violence, were uncharacteristically gentle as he opened it. Inside were items that stopped Harper's breath. A faded ribbon she used to wear in her hair, a small wooden bird, papers folded neatly with childlike handwriting, and at the bottom, a simple bracelet made of braided string. "You kept all this?" she whispered. Dante didn't meet her gaze. "They were all I took with me when I left St. Margaret's." He lifted the bracelet with quiet reverence. The colored strings had dulled over time. "You made this for me, for my 14th birthday," Harper said, voice soft. "You said it would keep me safe." A memory surfaced in her mind, like a flash breaking through fog. She had made that bracelet in secret, late at night while the other children slept, determined to give something back to the boy who had always looked after her, who made sure she never went hungry, who carried her when her arms gave out trying to use the crutches they insisted were for her own good. "Vitcha," she murmured suddenly, the nickname slipping from her lips unbidden. "That's what I called you, not Dante. Vitcha." His eyes widened slightly at the sound of it, a name Harper now realized hadn't been spoken to him in years. "Yes," he said quietly. "No one has called me that since." "Since I left," Harper finished for him. "You disappeared. One day you were there, and then—" She frowned, trying to reconnect scattered thoughts. "They told me you ran away, that you left the orphanage, left me." Dante's jaw tensed. "They lied." "Then what happened?" she demanded. "Why did you leave me there, alone?" He set the small box aside and turned toward the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. "I was 14, he began, his voice distant. "The director of St. Margaret's, Father Mathis, you remember him?" Harper nodded. She remembered. The cold, severe man who ran the place like a prison. "He had deals, arrangements," Dante continued, "with men in the city looking for boys to employ." His voice turned sharp. "Boys with no families, boys no one would miss." Harper covered her mouth in horror, suddenly understanding. "He was selling them?" "Not officially," Dante said bitterly. "They called them apprenticeships." He looked back at her. "I'd drawn his attention. I was strong, defiant, a fighter, the kind they thought might survive. He told me I was leaving with a man named Kuzman, a businessman looking for young men with potential." Dante's expression hardened. "But I knew. Everyone at St. Margaret's whispered about the boys Kuzman took, how they came back years later in expensive cars dripping gold if they came back at all." "The mafia," Harper whispered. Dante nodded. "I told Father Mathis I wouldn't go, that I needed to stay." He smirked coldly. "He told me I didn't have a choice." Then his gaze met hers. "I told him I couldn't leave because I had to protect you." Tears stung Harper's eyes, imagining that teenage boy standing up to authority for her. "He laughed," Dante continued, his voice brittle. "Said if I refused, he'd send you instead." "Not with Kuzman. No, but there were others. Businessmen who might find uses for a pretty little crippled girl." Harper's stomach twisted at the cruelty, at the vile threat toward a child. "So you went," she whispered, "to protect me." "I went," Dante confirmed, "but first I made him promise, swear, you would never be touched, that no arrangement would ever involve you." A faint, bitter smile crossed his lips. "I threatened him, 14 years old, but he believed me. He saw something in me, even then, something that scared him." "What did you threaten him with?" she asked quietly. Dante's gaze darkened. "I told him that, if anything happened to you, if you were ever hurt or taken, I'd return one day and burn that place to the ground, with him inside." Harper shivered. There was no doubt in her mind. He had meant it. And even now, he still would. "So you became one of them, to save me," she said. "But why not tell me? Why let me think you'd left me behind?" Pain flickered across Dante's face. "I was 14, Harper, going to serve one of the most ruthless crime families in the city. What could I have said? That I was going to become a criminal, so you could stay safe. That I might never come back." He shook his head slowly. "It was easier if you forgot. Better you hate me for leaving than know the truth." Harper moved closer in her chair, looking up at him, at the man who had once been her quiet guardian. "What happened with Kuzman?" she asked. Dante's face hardened, retreating behind the cold walls he wore so well. I learned the business. I was good at it, strong, smart, willing to do what was necessary to survive. Dante's voice was flat, like he was narrating someone else's life. Kuzman became a father to me, in his way, taught me everything. And when he was killed 7 years ago, I took over, expanded the territory. Harper spoke slowly, the pieces fitting together. That's how you became the most feared man in the city. In my world, fear keeps you alive, Dante replied simply. Then, softer. But I kept track of you. Always. I made sure you were safe. That you had what you needed when you left St. Hele. Margaret's at 18. The apartment you thought was a lucky break? The scholarship? The job? That was me. Harper's mind reeled. Her whole adult life, the independence she'd fought for, had been carefully guided by the man now standing before her. You were watching me all this time? She asked. Protecting you, Dante corrected gently. From a distance, just like I promised. But you never showed yourself, never talked to me, not until yesterday. Her voice wavered with something between betrayal and pain. Why now, Dante? Why come to me at the church after all these years of silence? His composure cracked slightly, just a flicker, but enough. Because I saw you crying, he said quietly. Because that man, who should have cherished you, shamed you in front of everyone. And I remembered a promise I made to a little girl in a wheelchair 20 years ago. Harper's voice was barely above a whisper. What promise? That no one would ever hurt you again, he said. Not while I was still breathing. The silence that followed weighed heavily. Decades of separation and sacrifice hung between them. Harper looked at Dante, trying to reconcile the ruthless crime boss with the boy who once read to her and carried her upstairs. Both were him. Both were real. So now what? She asked. You've saved me from being humiliated. Brought me here to your fortress. What am I now? Your ward? Your responsibility? Your prisoner? Dante's expression softened more than she thought possible. None of those, he said. You're free to leave whenever you want. I'll give you whatever you need. A home, financial support, whatever makes you feel safe. My protection will continue, but from a distance, like before. Then why bring me here at all? Harper pressed. Why not just help me walk away and set me up somewhere else? Dante hesitated. Something unguarded flickered in his eyes. Because, for one selfish moment, when I saw you in that dress crying, I wanted. He paused, struggling. I wanted to feel what it was like to protect you up close, not from afar, just once. Harper said nothing. The confession stood on its own, raw, quiet, and real. It cost him something. And then, a knock. Sharp, urgent. The door opened. Lucas stepped in, face grim. Boss, he said, we've got a problem. The Moretti shipment, ambushed at the docks. 3 dead, 2 critical. Dante's demeanor shifted instantly. The vulnerability gone, the warmth turned to steel. Who? He demanded. Castillo's crew. They left their mark. Luca's glance toward Harper was brief but telling. He was uneasy talking about this in front of her. Prep the car, Dante said, already crossing the room. Full team, armed. He paused at the door, casting one last look at Harper, torn between the man she remembered and the one he'd become. We'll finish this later, he said quietly. Stay inside, tell Sophia to activate emergency protocol. And then he was gone. Harper sat alone, surrounded by the relics of childhood and truths too heavy to hold. She turned toward the window, watching a fleet of black SUVs tear down the drive, carrying Dante toward violence she could only begin to imagine. Sophia arrived minutes later, her usually composed demeanor tinged with urgency. Come, child, she said gently but firmly. When trouble arises, we move to the secure rooms. Trouble? Harper asked, keeping pace as best she could down a hallway she hadn't been through before. Is it dangerous here? Sophia's face was grim. Mr. Moretti has enemies. Today they've made a move. It's unlikely they would attack the estate directly, but we take no chances. She led Harper to what looked like an ordinary guest room, but when Sophia pressed a hidden panel on the wall, a reinforced door swung open. Inside was a suite built like a bunker. Bulletproof glass, thick walls, and a design meant for long-term safety. This is intense, Harper said as she wheeled herself forward. These rooms are secure, Sophia explained. Comfortable, fully stocked, and monitored. A fortress within the fortress. A sitting area, kitchenette, and bedroom filled the space. A wall of television screens displayed live security feeds from around the property. How often does this happen? Harper asked, pausing at a window that looked out over the gardens, though the thick, bulletproof pane confirmed what Sophia had said. Not often, the housekeeper replied as she checked supplies with practiced efficiency. Mr. Moretti typically handles threats before they escalate. This attack was bold, unusual. Harper's hands rested tensely on her wheels. She had known she was stepping into something dark by staying here, but this? Reinforced bunkers, armed guards? It was a world she didn't recognize, one that seemed to tighten around her with each passing hour. Harper studied the older woman. "You've worked for him a long time, haven't you?" Sophia nodded. "Since he first bought this place, 10 years ago. He was young then, still building his world, but already formidable." "Did you know about me?" Harper asked. "Our past?" Sophia paused in her work, considering her words. "He told me there was a girl from his childhood, one he would always protect, that if the day ever came, accommodations should be in place. Ramps, access, everything. Just in case." Her expression softened. "I've worked for dangerous men most of my life, Miss Harper, but I've never seen one keep old ribbons in a box on his desk, or stare at childhood photographs with such ache in his eyes." The revelation struck something deep in Harper's chest. She pictured Dante, alone in some dim study, looking at the ghosts of a simpler time. A box of memories and a boy's promise buried under years of violence. How could a man who spilled blood still hold on to pieces of innocence? "He's a criminal," Harper murmured. "He's done things, terrible things." "Yes," Sophia answered calmly. "He is all of those things, but he is also the boy who protected you. Both truths can exist." Hours passed. No word from Dante. Harper watched the feeds, guards everywhere now, weapons out, tension in the air. Sophia brought food and tried to keep her distracted with small talk, but Harper couldn't stop thinking of him, of the boy he was and the man he'd become. Every second without news stretched her nerves thinner. She watched the door like it might open any moment and give her back some sense of certainty, but it never did. The screens were her only window to the chaos outside, and to the man who might not return. Past midnight, the convoy returned. Black SUVs came back down the long driveway, headlights bright. Harper's heart thudded painfully as she saw Dante step out of the lead vehicle. His white shirt was stained, dark and unmistakably blood. He moved slowly, clutching one side. Men surrounded him, shielding him as they hurried him inside. "He's hurt," Harper gasped. Sophia was already moving. "Stay here. I'll find out." Alone, Harper circled the room in her wheelchair, again and again, unable to sit still. Her thoughts spun with terrifying possibilities. How close had he come to dying? Would he even tell her the truth about what happened? Would she get the chance to ask? Finally, the door opened. Sophia returned, still calm but troubled. "He's with the doctor," she said. "A bullet grazed his side. It isn't life-threatening, but there was blood loss." "I want to see him," Harper said at once. Sophia hesitated. "He's not in a state to receive visitors." "When men like Mr. Moretti return from battle, they're not always themselves," Sophia warned quietly. "I don't care," Harper said firmly. "Take me to him." Perhaps it was the conviction in her eyes. Sophia finally gave a small nod. "Very well. But don't be shocked by what you see. This is his world, Miss Harper. This is who he is now." She led Harper through the mansion to a part of the house she hadn't seen before. A sleek, sterile medical suite. Outside the door stood Luca, the younger man from the church. His shirt was spattered with blood, though he seemed physically unharmed. His expression shifted when he saw Harper. "She wants to see him," Sophia said. "Is the doctor finished?" Luca nodded. "Just stepped out. He's in a mood. Refused pain meds." Sophia sighed. "Of course he did, stubborn as ever." She turned to Harper. "I'll wait here, call if you need me." Harper took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Inside, the room was lit with cold, clinical brightness. Dante sat shirtless on an exam table, his body a map of past violence, scars, bruises, and a fresh bandage around his ribs, stained faintly with red. His hands were scraped and raw, a cut above his eyebrow still glistening. He looked up, surprise flickering through the hardened glare in his eyes. "You shouldn't see this," he said hoarsely. "Not like this." Harper rolled forward. She couldn't look away. This was what his world truly was, violence, pain, and sacrifice. "This is the life you chose," she said softly. "Or maybe the life that chose you." He let out a rough, humorless laugh. "A rival thought I was distracted. They were wrong. They won't try it again." There was no pride in his tone, just grim certainty. "You're hurt," she said, noting the way his posture strained against the pain. "It's nothing," Dante muttered. "Just a scratch." Harper rolled in closer until she was directly in front of him. From her position in the wheelchair, she looked up into his shadowed expression. "You've spent 20 years protecting me, Dante. Maybe it's time someone looked after you." Something flickered in his eyes before he could hide it. "I don't need looking after." "Everyone does," Harper replied, reaching for a clean cloth, wetting it, and beginning to clean the dried blood from his hands. He tensed, not from pain but from the gentleness, like it startled him more than any wound. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, watching her with disbelief. "Because 20 years ago, a boy named Vico cleaned my scraped knees when I fell," she said quietly. "He read to me when I was scared. He carried me up staircases. He threatened to burn down a building to protect me." Dante didn't move. He let her clean the cut near his eye in silence. "That boy's gone, Harper." "No," she said softly. "He's still here, hurt, changed, but here, still keeping his promise." She paused, studying him. "I remember now. Not everything, but enough. I remember feeling safe when you were near, and I remember crying for days after you disappeared." Dante's gaze dropped, something cracking in his carefully controlled mask. "I never wanted to leave you," he murmured. "You were the only good thing I had." "And now?" Harper asked. "What am I to you now?" He lifted his eyes to meet hers, and for the first time, there was no shield. "Everything," he said simply. "The reason for all of it. Every decision, every step, every drop of blood I've spilled, it was to become someone powerful enough that no one could ever threaten you again." Harper's breath caught. "I never asked for that," she whispered. "It wasn't a sacrifice," Dante said, voice steady. "It was a choice, my choice, and I'd make it again." Harper reached up and touched his face lightly, brushing the edge of his jaw. He froze, the gesture clearly unfamiliar. "You protected me all these years," she said. "But who protected you?" His eyes closed for a second. "No one," he admitted. "That's not how it works in my world. Maybe your world needs to change." His eyes opened, sharp again. "My world keeps you safe? That attack today? That's what it costs. Men died. I killed. That's what protection looks like." "I know," Harper said, pulling her hand away. "I'm not naive. I don't expect you to walk away from everything. But maybe you don't have to keep me at such a distance anymore," Harper said gently, meeting Dante's gaze. "Maybe we both need to remember what it feels like to have someone care whether we live or die." Dante watched her closely, searching her expression for something. Fear, doubt, pity. But he found none of it. Whatever decision he reached, it showed only in the quiet finality of his words. "Stay," he said. "Not as a prisoner. Not as a duty or a debt. Just stay. For now. Until we figure out what this is." It wasn't love. It wasn't even friendship. Not yet. It was space. Time. An opportunity to rediscover what had been buried beneath years of change and silence. To see if the boy named Vico and the feared man Dante Moretti could both exist in her life. "I'll stay," Harper agreed, her voice quiet. Something flickered across Dante's features, a flash of relief quickly buried beneath his usual control. But Harper had seen it, just as she had seen the ghost of the boy in the man before her. The days that followed settled into a strange but peaceful rhythm. With Dante's injury forcing him to remain home, he and Harper had more chances to reconnect, cautiously and deliberately. Meals were shared, some in silence, others filled with gentle conversation. They talked about the books Harper had loved growing up, changes in the city, her time in college. She discovered a side of him few likely ever saw. Curious, intelligent, quietly observant. He was well-read, his knowledge of literature and art surprisingly broad. When asked, Dante admitted he had taught himself. In his world, appearing educated and sophisticated was as valuable as appearing dangerous. But Harper suspected there was more to it. A man who'd had to fight for every scrap of dignity had learned to build a mind as formidable as his reputation. Dante, in turn, continued to keep the brutal part of his life separate. The West Wing remained closed to her, and he still disappeared behind its heavy doors for long hours. Sometimes he returned with a hardness in his eyes that told Harper more than words ever could. But when he was with her, he left that world behind, even if only briefly. 1 week passed. Then 2. Neither of them brought up the agreement they had made. There was no need. Harper no longer felt like a guest. She had begun to feel something that terrified her more than confinement. Safe. One evening, they sat in the Grand Library. Dante was reading aloud from a book of Eastern European folk tales, stories Harper remembered vaguely from her childhood. Back then, he had told them from memory, crafting worlds of wonder in the dim dormitory light of the orphanage. "I used to think you made those stories up," she said, interrupting gently between tales. "They always felt perfect, too magical to be real." Dante gave her a rare smile. "I may have adapted them, changed the endings that were too dark. A child who already knew too much sadness deserved something softer." In the warm glow of the lamp beside him, Harper studied his face. The cut above his brow had healed, but that sense of danger clung to him still, etched in his posture, in the way he sat angled to see the door, in the way his eyes drifted occasionally to the windows, always alert, always ready. "Did anyone ever tell you stories?" she asked softly. After you left Fairview home, something shifted in Dante's expression. Valen didn't believe in fairy tales. He believed in hard lessons. He closed the book and placed it gently on the table. "But I remembered those stories. Sometimes, during the worst of it, I'd repeat them in my head. Think about the little girl who still believed in magic and happy endings." A flicker of pain crossed his face. "It kept me human, when everything else tried to turn me into something else." Harper moved her wheelchair a little closer. Over the past weeks, she had learned how to navigate the mansion with ease, its thoughtful design becoming more apparent with every turn, every ramp, every wide corridor. All of it planned long ago for her arrival. "You told me once I wouldn't want to know what you became," she said softly. "But I think I already do. I've seen enough. And yes, there's darkness there. There's violence, power. And yeah, it scares me sometimes. But I also see the boy who carried me upstairs, who made me laugh when I was scared, who held on to the things I made for him for 20 years. Dante's face stayed guarded, but his eyes, always so hard, softened. "The things I've done, Harper, they can't be erased. They can't be forgiven." "I'm not offering forgiveness," Harper said. "Forgiveness means I'm judging you. And I'm not. I didn't live your life after they took you from Fairview. I can't pretend to know what choices you had to make." She reached out and rested her hand on his. "I'm offering something else. Understanding, acceptance. The boy and the man, the protector and the predator." He looked down at their hands, hers smaller, steady over his. He didn't move, almost as if he was afraid to scare her away. "Why?" he asked, voice low and thick. "Why would you want any part of this, of me?" Harper's answer came without hesitation. "Because you never once looked at me like I was broken," she said. "Not then? Not now. You never pitied me. You didn't see a problem to be fixed. You saw me. Just me. And that's rare, Dante. So rare." Her fingers tightened slightly around his. "Most people see the chair first. You never did." The wall Dante had kept between them cracked a little more. "I never pitied you because I knew you," he said. "Even back then you had more strength than anyone in that place. More kindness, too. When Valen tried to turn me into something cold, I thought about you. How you kept smiling, how you didn't let it change you. That memory, it kept something alive in me. A part I couldn't let them destroy." The distance between them seemed to vanish in that moment. 20 years collapsed into the quiet weight of everything unspoken. In his eyes, Harper saw something deeper than protection or obligation. Something warmer. Something she wasn't ready to name, but she felt it settle deep inside her. Before either of them could say anything more, the door slammed open. It was Marcus, the younger of Dante's men. His expression was tight with urgency. "Boss," he said quickly, "we've got confirmation. Moretti's crew is making their move tonight, east side. Our guys are ready, but they need orders." Dante changed instantly. The softness vanished. He stood, all steel and command again. "Get Harper to the secure room," he ordered. "Double the perimeter. No one in or out without my word." "Already handled," Marcus said. "The car's waiting." Dante turned to Harper. His face was no longer that of the man who had been reading her stories minutes earlier. This was Dante Moretti, the mafia boss. "I have to go," he said, clipped and efficient. "Stay with Sophia. Go to the secure room." "I know the protocol," Harper cut in gently. "I'll be safe. Be careful, Vitya." The childhood name made him pause, just for a beat. Then the armor returned. He nodded once and was gone, barking orders at Marcus as they headed toward the west wing. Hours passed. Harper sat inside the secure room with Sophia, just as they had weeks before. The older woman knitted with a calm that came from years of practice, while Harper's nerves were taut with anxiety. Somewhere out there, Dante was in a situation that was no doubt violent, possibly deadly. "Does it get easier?" she asked finally. Waiting, not knowing. The needles kept moving. "No," Sophia said. "But you learn to have faith. Mr. Moretti is calculating. He never takes unnecessary risks." "But tonight is different," Harper said. "I saw it in Marcus's face, and Dante." Sophia's hands finally paused. "Yes," she admitted. "This enemy Castillo, it's personal, not just business." "What kind of personal?" Sophia hesitated, weighing her words. "Castillo once mentored Mr. Moretti after Valen died. He trusted him, taught him, then betrayed him in a grab for control that nearly killed Mr. Moretti." She looked grim. "It was the closest I've ever seen him to death. 3 bullets. He recovered in this house, barely. That was when he began planning his rise, his revenge." "Did he ever get it?" Harper asked. "Not completely," Sophia replied. "He reclaimed what was his, but Castillo disappeared. Surface. Vanish. He's been a shadow ever since. Tonight might end that." The tension thickened as the night dragged on. Midnight, then 1 a.m., no word. Harper tried to distract herself, books, muted television, but her thoughts never drifted from Dante. At nearly 3 a.m., one of the security monitors lit up. A black SUV approached the gate at high speed. The guards verified, then opened the gate. "He's back," Harper whispered in relief. Sophia stood beside her, eyes narrowed. She watched as Dante stepped from the vehicle alone, moving quickly toward the house. "No," she said suddenly. "Something's wrong. He wouldn't return without Marcus unless—" The secure room phone rang. Sophia snatched it up, her face draining of color as she listened. "Yes," she said, then hung up and turned to Harper. "We need to go. Mr. Moretti needs us, now." "What happened?" Harper asked, already moving. "Castillo," Sophia said darkly. "He knows about you." Dante's office was in the part of the house Harper had never been allowed to see before. The West Wing. The room was large, the desk massive, walls covered in monitors showing live footage from all over the city. There were maps, tactical notes. The faint scent of gunpowder clung to the air, along with Dante's familiar cologne. He stood by the window, still in the same clothes as before, though now they bore evidence of a fight, scuffs, tears, blood. When he turned around, Harper was struck by his expression. It wasn't cold this time. It was pure, unchecked rage. "Sit," he ordered, pointing to a spot near his desk. Harper positioned her chair. "Sophia, lock the house. No one in or out, not even staff. Full perimeter security." Sophia moved swiftly to a wall panel and keyed in a long code. Harper heard the mechanical hum of locks engaging, shutters closing, a steel cage sealing around the mansion. "What's going on?" she asked. "Sophia said Castillo knows about me." "Knows what?" Dante stopped pacing, his fists clenched. "Everything," he said through gritted teeth. "Who you are, what you mean to me, and your past. Fairview. The fact that you're here," Dante said, his eyes locked on Harper's with a blazing intensity that mixed fury with something more fragile. "Fear. We had Castillo cornered tonight. It was almost over. Then he smiled and asked how my little crippled orphan was enjoying my hospitality." Harper flinched, the cruelty of the words cutting deep, but she pushed past the sting. "He was baiting you." Dante nodded grimly. "And it worked. I hesitated. Just for a second. That's all he needed to escape." He slammed his fist onto the desk. "Stupid. Reckless. Emotional. So, he knows about me." Harper's voice was steady, controlled. "Why the extreme lockdown then?" Dante's expression darkened. "Because Castillo doesn't just take down enemies. He destroys everything they care about first. Everyone they love." His voice faltered slightly on that last word. "He's coming for you, Harper, to hurt me." The full weight of her situation crashed into focus. This wasn't abstract danger. It was real, personal, and close. For the first time since arriving, Harper felt real fear. "What do we do?" she asked. Dante looked at her, almost startled by the calm in her tone. "We prepare. This estate is the most secure place I control. Armed personnel, electronic defenses, reinforced structure. But we can't stay locked down indefinitely." He scanned the wall of monitors. "Marcus and the rest are still in the city, cleaning up. Once they return, we fortify. Then I finish this." "With me as bait," Harper said quietly. Dante's head snapped around. "Never. You stay here, safe." "But that's exactly what he'll expect," she countered. "He knows you well enough to predict that you'll keep me locked away. He'll plan for it. Dante's gaze narrowed, evaluating her more seriously now. You're thinking tactically. I'm thinking about surviving, Harper said, for both of us. I may not know your world, Dante, but I'm not naive. If Castillo is as dangerous as you say, the standard playbook won't be enough. Something flickered in Dante's eyes, respect. What are you suggesting? Use me, Harper said. Not as bait, not passively. Use what he thinks he knows. He expects me to be helpless. Let him underestimate me. No. Dante's voice was sharp. I didn't protect you all these years to put you in the crosshairs now. You protected me so I could live, not hide, Harper said. Don't ask me to be a victim. I've fought my whole life to prove I'm not defined by this chair. Their gazes locked, the tension building between his protective fury and her unwavering resolve. It was Sophia who broke the silence. She's not wrong, Mr. Moretti, she said softly. Castillo will expect the obvious response. You shielding her. He knows how you operate. Dante's jaw clenched. This isn't up for debate. Harper stays secured. He turned toward the desk, unfurling a blueprint of the property. We'll reinforce these points. Marcus and the others will be back by morning. To what end? Harper asked, moving closer. To start a firefight right here? How many of your men are you willing to lose for that plan? I'm not asking to pick up a weapon, she continued. I'm asking not to be the weak spot he exploits. Let me help. Dante's expression twisted with inner conflict. The strategist in him saw reason, but the protector recoiled. Castillo doesn't know you, he said finally, his voice a low rumble. The real you he sees as a weakness to exploit, not a strength to fear, Dante said, his voice low with restrained emotion. That's his mistake. Harper felt a flicker of hope ignite at that admission. Then let's use that mistake, together. Dante studied her face for a long moment, expecting fear, finding resolve. At last he nodded once, a clipped gesture of reluctant agreement. We plan together, he said. But your safety is non-negotiable. If this turns, You'll do what you think is necessary to protect me, Harper finished softly. As you always have. The tension between them shifted subtly. Something unspoken passed between them, rebalancing the dynamic. For the first time, Dante wasn't just seeing Harper as someone to be guarded, but as someone capable of guarding back. Still physically vulnerable, but unwavering in courage. As dawn crept over the Moretti estate, their plan took final form. Dante folded Harper's strategic suggestions into the larger operation, grudgingly respecting her insights. Sophia brought coffee and contributed her own pragmatic observations, calm as ever in the face of looming danger. By the time Marcus returned with reinforcements, the strategy was complete. They would let Castillo believe Harper was exposed, play into his assumptions. But behind every apparent vulnerability, they had positioned strength, layers of defense and deception, with Harper at the center. 3 days of tense vigilance followed. Harper remained inside the estate, refusing the panic room. Instead, she moved throughout the main floor with visible security, a deliberate display meant for the eyes watching from the tree line. Dante hardly left her side, caught in the push and pull between the ruthless tactician and the guardian who loved her. On the third night, Harper sat in the library, positioned near the tall windows. The view was calm, deceptively serene. She held a book in her lap, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Dante entered quietly, tension radiating off him. He moved like a man preparing for war, calculated, alert, dangerous. Marcus spotted Castillo's advance men, he said. They're probing the perimeter. It begins tonight. Harper closed the book with steady hands. Then we're ready. Dante's gaze held hers for a beat. There was something softer beneath the hardness, a flicker of vulnerability. You still have a choice, he said. We can move you underground, get you out of the country. You don't have to be part of this. Harper rolled her chair closer, reached for his hand. He let her take it, the contact grounding them both. I already am, she replied. Since the church, maybe since that photo in front of the orphanage 20 years ago. She squeezed his hand, her voice sure. We face this together, Vitia. An emotion flickered across Dante's face, layered and deep, built on decades of memory and quiet sacrifice. Whatever happened next, Harper knew. He wouldn't face it alone. If anything happens to you, Dante began. It won't, Harper cut in firmly, because you won't let it, and neither will I. Dante raised their intertwined hands, brushing his lips lightly against her knuckles, an intimate gesture that surprised them both. "When this is over," he said, voice raw, "we need to talk. About this, us, whatever this is turning into." Before Harper could reply, Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face tight. "Movement detected on the east perimeter," he reported. "They've silently breached the first line of defense." Dante released Harper's hand wordlessly, his demeanor hardening into the commander he had always been. "Begin phase 1, he ordered. Then to Harper, "Stay here, just as we planned. 2 guards outside, comms open at all times." "I remember," Harper said calmly. "I know my role." Dante nodded once, then exited with Marcus, heading straight into danger. Harper positioned herself precisely as they'd strategized, within sight of the large library windows, appearing alone and vulnerable. Her guards were just outside, and the small comm device rested inconspicuously in her lap. Time dragged. Crackling reports came intermittently through the comms. Defenses breached, teams in position, possible flanks. Harper kept her eyes on the hallway shadows, every nerve tense. Then chaos. Gunfire erupted from the east side of the estate. Harper heard shouted commands and the unmistakable edge of combat through the comms. Then an explosion shook the room, books raining from the shelves. The lights flickered. Victor's voice blared over the device. "Diversion, they're coming from the west. Marcus, flank right." And then silence. The signal cut off. Harper tried re-establishing contact. Nothing. Moments later, the sound of struggle came from outside the door, grunting, a dull thud. Then silence. Wrong. This wasn't protocol. The door burst open. 2 strangers entered, not part of Dante's team. Well, one sneered, eyes raking over Harper's still form. "Dante Moretti's precious little secret, right where he hid you." Harper gripped the armrests of her wheelchair, forcing calm. These were Castillo's men, and they weren't here to kill her. Not yet. "What happened to the guards?" she demanded, voice steady. The first man laughed. "They're resting, permanently." He nodded to the other. "Get her. Boss wants her untouched this time." The second man approached. Harper flinched backward, playing the role they expected, the helpless, crippled girl. Her right hand, unseen, slid to the panel on the side of her chair. She pressed the hidden button. With a mechanical thunk, the heavy library doors slammed shut behind the intruders. Metal bolts locked into place. Both men spun. Hissing began as gas released from overhead vents. Their eyes widened, panic setting in. They had walked straight into a trap. Not lethal, Dante had assured her, just enough to knock them out in seconds. Harper retrieved the small oxygen mask from its hidden compartment beneath her wheelchair cushion, slipping it on just as the intruders began to panic. They turned back toward the sealed door, pounding in vain, then spun around with rage. "You bitch!" The first man snarled, lunging toward her. But the gas hit him hard. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. The second man followed moments later. Harper kept breathing through the mask, counting down the 2 minutes Dante had instructed, the time it would take for the ventilation system to clear the room. The plan had worked, mostly. These 2 were down, but her communication link with Dante had gone silent. That was not part of the plan. Her heart thudded in her chest, not from fear, but from the deafening absence of his voice. She hadn't realized just how much she'd come to rely on those clipped, confident updates until the silence stretched long enough to fill her with dread. The library doors clicked open. Harper tensed, unsure whether it would be friend or enemy. She slipped her hand beneath her chair again, retrieving the compact pistol Dante had begrudgingly issued her after hours of training and debate. The door opened. Marcus stepped in, blood running from a gash on his temple. She lowered the gun, flooded with relief. "It worked," he said, surveying the unconscious men. "Good, we need to move. The mansion's compromised." "Where's Dante?" Harper asked, following as Marcus held the door for her. "Castillo was smarter than we thought. The western assault was just a decoy. He used an underground access tunnel, one even we didn't know about. Dante went after him himself, told me to get you to the secondary site." Her stomach turned. "He's facing Castillo alone?" The words hit her like a blow. She pictured Dante, outnumbered, outgunned, confronting a man who'd haunted his life for years. Alone. And she was here, safe, because that was what he'd chosen for her. "Plans change in battle," Marcus said. "We can't help him if you're not secure. That's his first priority. Now it's mine." He tapped his earpiece. "Jace, East Entry. Package secure. Need extraction." They navigated through halls torn apart by the fight, Scorched walls, broken fixtures, small fires being extinguished by Dante's crew. Harper's heart ached at the destruction, knowing her presence had been the cause. But there was pride, too. She hadn't been useless this time. For once she had done more than endure. She had acted. Played her part in something bigger than herself. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about choosing to matter. A blast shook the estate, much closer now. "The West Wing," Marcus growled. "They're trying to collapse it." He turned to Jace, who had arrived at the entrance. "Get her out. Use the tunnel route to Site Bravo. I'm going after the boss." "Marcus, wait," Harper called as Jace took over, pushing her chair. "Dante'll kill me if anything happens to you," Marcus muttered. "Go. I'll get him." Jace hustled her down a sloped path through a disguised exit Harper hadn't noticed before. They entered a dim underground tunnel. "Where does this go?" she asked. "Secondary safe house," Jace replied, moving fast. 2 clicks out. Fully underground, built 5 years ago. Of course it was. Dante planned for everything. And yet, Castillo had found a way in. That thought chilled her more than the air in the tunnel. Because if Dante hadn't seen this coming, if even he could be blindsided, then what did that mean for what was waiting ahead? They emerged into a reinforced bunker, smaller than the mansion, but secure. Stocked, fortified. Jace immediately began locking down the entrance and activating perimeter systems. "Now we wait," he told her, bringing up the surveillance feeds. "No communication until Dante or Marcus shows. Too risky." Harper stared at the monitors showing the perimeter, nothing but a clearing surrounded by thick forest. The bunker was cleverly disguised as a hunting lodge. There was no camera feed from the mansion. No way to know what was happening back there. "And if they don't come?" she asked quietly. Jace's youthful face turned grim. "The boss always has a backup plan. Always." He tapped a hidden panel on the wall, revealing a secured safe. "If we don't hear from them within 24 hours, there are protocols. Passports, cash, new IDs. His confidence faltered briefly, but he added, "It won't come to that. He's survived worse than this." Harper wasn't so sure. From what Sophia had told her, Castillo was different. This wasn't business. This was betrayal. A man who'd once mentored Dante. He knew how Dante thought, and more importantly, what Dante valued. Hours dragged by in silence. Jace moved with precise vigilance, monitoring the feeds, checking security codes again and again. Harper sat still, trying to calm her nerves, trying to believe in Dante. But as midnight passed with no word, unease wrapped around her like a vice. Then, a soft beep, the perimeter alarm. Jace stiffened, his hand already on his weapon as he scanned the monitors. "Movement," he said tightly. "One figure, coming in slow." He leaned closer. "It's him. It's the boss." Relief rushed through his voice. Harper moved beside him, heart pounding as Dante appeared on screen, emerging from the trees alone. But something was wrong. He was limping, one arm held tight to his body, each step unsteady. "He's hurt," Harper said urgently. "Open the door." "Protocol says." "Now, Jace," she snapped. Maybe it was her tone, maybe it was her face. Either way, Jace didn't argue again. He moved quickly, unlocking the security system. The outer door opened, and there stood Dante, barely upright. His shirt was soaked in blood, face marked with bruises and cuts. He clutched his left side, red seeping between his fingers. But his expression stopped her. Raw pain, exhaustion, and beneath it all, a strange calm. "Harper," he rasped. "You're safe," she cried, rushing forward as Jace moved to catch him. "What happened? Where's Castillo? Where's Marcus?" Dante allowed himself to be lowered into a chair, face tight with pain as he sat. "Marcus is securing what's left of the estate," Dante said, his breath shallow. "The fires are under control. Most of our people made it out." "And Castillo?" Harper pressed, moving closer, scanning his bloodied form. A grim smile tugged at Dante's lips. "Gone," he said simply. "Finally." The single word echoed with years of rivalry and betrayal, his entire adult life shaped by that vendetta. Harper saw it in his eyes. Something deep inside had shifted. A burden released. A war ended. "You're hurt," she said, trying to focus. "I've had worse," Dante replied, though the way he winced betrayed otherwise. "Not according to Sophia," Harper shot back, already reaching for the supplies Jace had prepared. "Let me see." To her surprise, Dante didn't argue. He allowed her to help him out of his torn jacket and shirt. The gash at his side was deep, a knife wound, not a gunshot. It was still bleeding steadily. "This needs stitches," she said, her voice catching as fear scraped at her composure. "Jace," Dante called, his tone still commanding despite the pain. "The black kit?" Jace nodded, returning moments later with a rugged military-grade med kit. Dante pulled a vial and syringe from it. "What's that?" Harper asked, eyeing it warily. "Something to buy us time," Dante answered, already prepping the injection. "Military coagulant. Not legal, but it works." He administered the shot, gritting his teeth through the sting. Within minutes, the blood slowed, though the wound still looked angry. "Call Dr. Perelman," Dante told Jace. "Meet us at the satellite clinic in an hour. No details over the line." As Jace made the call, Harper reached for Dante's hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could have died." Dante looked at her, the cold mask falling for just a moment. "But I didn't," he said, "and now he can't hurt you. Ever again." "Was it worth it?" she asked. "All of this? All of this?" Dante held her gaze. "To protect you, yes, always." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "But there's something else, something I saw clearly tonight." "What?" "That I've spent 2 decades building a fortress around my heart, protecting someone I cared for deeply without ever saying it aloud." His voice shook slightly, more than any injury had done. "That's the real cost. Not the blood, not the empire, the silence, the connection I kept away." Harper's grip on his hand tightened, tears threatening. "I care about you too, Vita," she whispered. "The boy who had nothing and gave me everything, and the man who still does, even the parts that terrify me." In that moment, surrounded by ruin, by pain, by all they'd endured, something in them changed. The bond wasn't just remembered. It was reborn. It had become something deeper, something stronger, tempered by the fire of shared danger, and forged in mutual trust. Dante lifted his hand to Harper's face, brushing away a tear with his thumb. "When this is over," he said quietly, "when I'm healed and the threat is gone, we'll need to talk about what comes next, for both of us." Harper nodded. She understood the gravity behind those words. What came next wasn't just about healing or reconstructing the estate. It was about 2 people, once abandoned, now forged survivors, trying to discover whether their fractured pieces could come together and make something whole. The days after Castillo's assault were filled with recovery and rebuilding. Dante's wound, while serious, wasn't fatal with the right treatment. Dr. Perelman, clearly used to handling injuries that couldn't be taken to a regular hospital, had stitched him up at the private clinic, administered antibiotics, and firmly advised rest, advice Dante predictably ignored. The estate had taken heavy damage, especially the West Wing, where Castillo's explosives had collapsed part of the structure. Construction crews worked constantly to restore it. Security was immediately upgraded to cover the weaknesses Castillo had exploited. Through it all, Harper remained beside Dante, not as a hostage or house guest, but as something neither of them had named yet. She helped change his dressings, insisted he take his medication despite the resistance, and gradually found herself stepping into a new role in the house. Sophia, to Harper's surprise, began deferring to her on matters related to Dante's recovery and daily care. Even Marcus, always serious and tight-lipped, started including her in updates and briefings during Dante's downtime. 2 weeks after the attack, Harper found Dante in his temporary office set up in the East Wing, while the West was under reconstruction. Despite strict instructions from Dr. Perelman, Dante was working, handling files, taking calls, still at the helm of his empire. "You're supposed to be resting," she said from the doorway, unsurprised when he didn't glance up from the papers in front of him. "I am resting," he replied dryly. "Sitting down, not lifting anything." "Taking your meds?" Harper asked as she wheeled herself into the room and stopped across from his desk. "That's not what rest means, and you know it." Dante finally looked up, a rare smile tugging at his lips. Over the past couple of weeks, those smiles had become more frequent, glimpses of the man beneath all the armor. "The business doesn't stop just because I caught a blade to the ribs," he said. "Especially now, Castillo's death has created openings and threats." Harper studied his face, noting the exhaustion beneath Dante's tightly held composure. "Power vacuums," she said, beginning to understand the mechanics of his world. "Everyone's scrambling to carve up Castillo's territory, testing if you're strong enough to defend yours." Dante's brows rose slightly, surprised and impressed. "Exactly. Which is why I can't afford to look weak. Can't disappear to heal while my enemies circle." "But you don't have to do it alone." Harper said quietly. Marcus is capable. Your lieutenants are loyal. They can take more of the day-to-day pressure while you focus on strategy. Dante set his pen down, really looking at her. When did you become such an expert on criminal power structures? He asked, half amused, half wary. I listen, Harper replied. I observe. And I'm not naive, Dante. I know what you do. I've accepted that this is your world. I'm only suggesting you find a better way to exist in it. Something in Dante's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition that surprised even him. You're right, he admitted. I've always kept everything on my shoulders. Trusting others hasn't come easy. Because of Castillo, Harper said softly. He taught you, then betrayed you. Of course, trust is hard. Dante nodded slowly. You see too much. There was no irritation in his voice, just a quiet awe, like he was still getting used to someone truly seeing him. Speaking of seeing things, Harper said, summoning her courage. You said we needed to talk about what comes next for us. I think it's time. Dante's posture shifted, tension creeping into his body even though he tried to appear relaxed. Yes, he said, his voice low. I suppose it is. A heavy silence settled between them, the kind that meant everything that followed would change something vital. I can't go back, Harper said finally, to who I was before. Not just because of the wedding, but because of everything since. I've changed. Dante's expression didn't move, but she saw how tightly he was holding himself. I'm stronger, Harper said. More confident. I spent so long trying to prove I was capable despite the chair, trying to make the world see me as more than this. She gestured to her legs. But here with you, it's never been the focus. You see me, all of me. It's liberating. A flicker of relief crossed Dante's face. I'm glad, he said. But Harper, my world doesn't offer peace. Castillo is gone, but others will come. Men like me, we don't get happy endings. I'm not asking for a fairy tale. Harper replied firmly. I want honesty, the right to choose my path knowing the risks. Dante moved around the desk, kneeling carefully before her chair so they were eye to eye. A deliberate gesture, one of equality. What do you want, Harper? He asked, voice raw and exposed. Tell me what you want, and if I can give it to you, I will. Harper took his hands in hers. I want to stay, she said with clarity. Not as someone to be sheltered or watched over, but as a partner. Someone who walks beside you, someone who helps carry what you've built. Dante's expression moved from vulnerable to stunned. A partner? In what way? In every way, Harper said. Personally, professionally. He blinked, shock breaking through his iron exterior. Professionally? You're not serious. I am, Harper interrupted. I've seen how your world works, Dante. I understand the dynamics, the loyalties, the strategic mindset needed. I'm not saying I want to be out there on the streets or get involved in violence. But there are other sides to what you do. Real businesses, financial operations, decisions that require foresight. I can help with that. Dante's surprise gave way to something deeper. Wonder. You want to be part of this? Part of me? Even knowing everything I am, everything I've done? I want to be part of shaping what you are, Harper said gently. Your world was built on fear and necessity, but it can evolve, with the right balance. She squeezed his hands. Your strength and my compassion, your vision, my perspective. Together, we could build something better. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was offering. This wasn't just a romantic gesture. It was a vow to walk beside him through darkness, to understand his demons, and still choose him anyway. Dante searched her face, hunting for any sign of hesitation or romantic idealism. He found none. You'd walk into this with open eyes, knowing the darkness it holds? I wouldn't walk it, Harper corrected with a small smile. I'd wield it, with you. And yes, eyes wide open, not for power or status, but for you. All of you. The boy who protected me and the man who still does. The one who's done dark things and still holds on to the light. There was a long silence, thick with unsaid things, until she added, her voice barely above a whisper, You don't have to carry it alone anymore. For a long beat, Dante said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a low, almost disbelieving sound that transformed his face. 20 years, he murmured. I spent 20 years building walls, becoming untouchable, convinced no one could ever love what I've become. And you want exactly this. Not exactly, Harper replied gently. I want what you are and what you could become. The man I believe you can be. Dante reached out, cupping her face, all pretense gone. Harper Lane, he said, using her full name for the first time since she arrived. You challenge me, you see me. He took a breath like he was about to jump from a great height. If it's partnership you want, true partnership, then I give it to you, freely. My heart, my home, my empire, all of it, equal in value. The echo of her own words brought tears to Harper's eyes. Equal in value, she repeated, if different in circumstance. He leaned closer, hesitating inches from her lips. Harper closed the distance, sealing their pact with a kiss that spoke of lost time and reclaimed futures. When they parted, Dante leaned his forehead against hers, his guard entirely down. There's one more thing, he murmured. Something I've wanted to say since the church, but I didn't have the nerve. What is it? Harper asked, her hands on either side of his face. I love you, he said. I've loved you since we were kids. That love's been the only constant in my entire life. The girl in the chair who saw me as more than a nobody orphan with a short fuse, that love shaped everything I've done. His voice cracked. It always came back to you. She felt the truth of it, like a balm to wounds she didn't realize she still carried. Words she had longed for but never dared hope to hear. His words hit Harper like a surge of warmth into the coldest parts of her soul. I love you too, Dante, she said. The boy you were, the man you've become, all of it. And in that moment, something within Dante Leone shifted. A final piece fell into place. She saw it in his eyes, the last barrier falling. For the first time since he was 14, he let himself be fully known, fully vulnerable. The weeks that followed transformed them both, and the empire around them. With Harper's influence, Dante began a slow, intentional shift. Criminal activities gave way to investments in legitimate ventures. Violence didn't vanish, but it became a tool of last resort, not the default response. Rivals expecting retaliation were surprised to find themselves disarmed through pressure, alliances, or economic finesse. The mansion was rebuilt, but it was different now. Warmer, less fortress, more home. Sophia observed these changes with quiet approval, occasionally allowing herself a small smile when she saw Dante and Harper working together in his office, or sharing peaceful moments in the library. 3 months after Castillo's attack, Dante surprised Harper, not with a ring, but with documents. They stood in his fully restored office when he handed her a folder. What's this? Harper asked, taking it. Partnership papers, Dante replied, a flicker of nervousness in his usually steady voice. Legal documents making you co-owner of all my legitimate holdings, equal authority, equal stake in everything I've built. Harper flipped through them, realization dawning. This is real, she said. Not just symbolic, this gives me actual power. That's the idea, Dante confirmed. Equal partners, like we agreed, in every sense. He hesitated. There's something else in there too, if you want it. She turned to the final page and found not a business document, but a marriage license. Blank, waiting for signatures, her breath caught. Dante held out a velvet box and opened it. Inside lay a sapphire ring, rich blue surrounded by smaller stones. I thought maybe we could make this official, he said. Not because we need a wedding to prove anything, but because I want the world to know. You're not just protected by Dante Leone, you're my partner, my equal, my heart. Tears welled in Harper's eyes as she took in the meaning behind the gesture. Yes, she said simply, to all of it. Dante slipped the ring onto her finger, then knelt beside her chair to seal their commitment with a kiss that meant more than legal documents ever could. Their wedding, held a month later, looked nothing like the one that had brought them back together. Rather than a traditional church, they chose the mansion's gardens under the stars. Instead of formal wear, Harper wore a dress tailored for her, dramatic, graceful, embracing her wheelchair rather than hiding it. The guests were not socialites or distant family, but the inner circle of Dante's organization, people who had witnessed the transformation he underwent with Harper by his side. Marcus served as best man, his stern features softened with genuine pride. Sophia walked beside Harper down the aisle. Their vows were their own, centered on protection, partnership, and the strength found in vulnerability. As Dante placed the band next to the sapphire ring, his hands trembled. I promise to protect you as children, he said clearly. Today I promise something greater, to stand beside you, to share my strength instead of simply using it, to deserve the love you've given me despite everything I've done. You saved me, Harper, from power without purpose, from loneliness. Harper's vows acknowledged their extraordinary path. "I spent my life proving I wasn't defined by this chair," she said, touching the metal frame. "But you never needed proof. You saw all of me. Today I vow to see you fully too. The light and the darkness. To be your balance, your comfort, your equal." The ceremony wasn't just the start of a marriage, it marked a new chapter in Dante's empire. One guided by compassion and strength, shared equally. Later, they found a quiet moment in the garden. Dante stood behind Harper's chair, hands resting on her shoulders. "Happy?" he asked. Harper reached up, feeling the ring on his hand. "Beyond words, and you?" He paused. "I never thought I'd have this. A future without fear, love without regret." He kissed the top of her head. "You gave me what I never dared hope for." "We gave it to each other," she replied. "Equal partners, remember?" Dante chuckled. "Equal partners," he repeated. "In this life and whatever comes next." Back among their guests, Harper caught glimpses of what lay ahead. Marcus treating her input as equal, Sophia deferring to her presence, captains looking to her for guidance as they did Dante. The shift was already happening. The feared mafia boss had become one half of a balanced power. The empire no longer just his, it was theirs. It wasn't a fairy tale. Their life still involved risks. Their business walked between legitimate and gray. But it was theirs, defined not by the past, but by shared choices. For Harper, who had once been underestimated, and for Dante, shaped by survival, this beginning was true freedom. The orphan boy who protected her had become a man who respected her strength. The girl who once relied on him now stood beside him, equally. Equal in value if different in circumstance. Partners in all things. A love story not typical, but deeply real. From a public rejection to the power seat of the city's most feared empire, Harper's journey proved that sometimes endings are beginnings in disguise. And for Dante, who spent decades building walls to protect what he loved, he learned that true strength lies not just in power, but in love willingly shared. Their legacy lives on, shaped by power and compassion, proving that love, once found, transforms everything it touches. So here we are, my wonderful friends. The story has come to an end, or maybe it's just a beginning in disguise. You're still here, aren't you? If you're hearing these words right now, that means something in this journey touched your heart. Maybe it was Harper's quiet strength, maybe it was Dante's long road to redemption, or maybe it reminded you of something in yourself, a piece you thought was lost, or a hope you're still holding on to. This isn't just a love story. It's a reminder that healing is possible, that no matter how much pain or darkness we carry, there's a path back, through connection, through truth, through courage. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Harper could have chosen bitterness. Dante could have stayed behind his walls. But they both chose differently. And in doing so, they found something many people spend their whole lives searching for. Not just love, but meaning. And isn't that what we all crave? A sense that our story matters? That the scars we carry were not for nothing? As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Their obstacles didn't end them, they shaped them. And maybe yours will too. So if this story moved you, even just a little, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, like it, subscribe. Not just for more stories, but because we're building something here. A place where stories heal, where fiction reminds us of truth, and where we remember, no matter who you are or what you've been through, you are equal in value, even if different in circumstance.